Hello. I don't know how this happened, but this channel kind of just became a book review channel because every time I read a book, I want to talk about it. So, book I just read, I finished yesterday, The Dictator's Handbook, as would be implied by the title. So, I just want to make this clear. I'm not going to remember all of it. I read the whole thing all the way through, but also I read it on Audible, aka listen to it. So, I'm not going to remember everything. It's dense. It's not long per se, but it's not short either. It's almost 12 hours just listening to it, so bear that in mind. But I did go ahead and listen to the whole thing. The only reason why I listened to the book is because it's the book that CGP Grey based his episode Rules for Rulers on. And pretty much the entire book revolves around that concept. And looking at it realistically, for the most part, to include most of our examples, not all, most of the book is applicable. The idea to the book is that dictators try to shrink their coalition as much as possible. Say, like, this isn't just political leaders, this is corporate leaders as well, and he does implicate that quite often. Typically, you try to keep a coalition of fewer than 10 people. You can't have just one or two because one person cannot make every single decision. It's just not realistic. Not just it's not practical, it's not possible. You can't have one person make every single individual decision. I mean, why would the king of Oman care about a land dispute between two neighbors? Honestly, why would that be a thing? So, no, the king's not going to do everything. But if you shrink the coalition down to, say, 8 people, those 8 people can make everything happen. And the point of the book is that it's about lining your coalition's pockets through, usually it's through money. Go figure. I mean, I think it's the second book of Timothy that says money's the root of all evil. And this is kind of where that concept comes from. Even though bribery existed long before the Bible, or that part of the Bible, because I think Timothy is the New Testament. I'm not going to get into the whole, like, Timothy being, or I think Timothy was one of them that was, like, forged or whatnot, but I could be wrong on that. I think it was that one, but we also don't know. Because, let's face it, it was long enough ago. But, that notwithstanding, bribery's been around forever, and you keep your coalition happy, and it keeps you in power longer. One of the things that they really emphasized was if you can make it probably about past your first 2 years as a dictator, you're probably going to last. You rarely hear about dictators that have only been in power for 4 years. And usually it's because it only happened 4 years ago. They're not getting overthrown anytime soon. Which is why whenever you hear about dictators getting overthrown, it's usually because they've been in power for about 4 decades. So, like, it basically tries to, rather than trying to delve into all the different exterior motives that could cause a dictatorship to fall, like with Muammar Gaddafi. I want to make this clear. This book was published 2011. I didn't look at the copyright date, but you could easily tell that it was published 2011, partly because they talk about things that happened in 2011, like it references the date 2011. But it does not reference the death of Osama bin Laden, albeit it does talk about him. There were very important events that happened in 2011 that it just didn't talk about. That being probably the one that most people remember the most. Wait. Yes. Yeah, that was 2011. It talks about the Arab Spring at the beginning of 2011. It talks about Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Syria, pretty much all the different countries that the Arab Spring happened in 2011. But it makes no mention of SEAL Team 6 and Zero Dark 30. So, yeah, it's very easy to pin down, like, the exact time frame that it happened. And, like, the moral of the story ended up being expand the coalition as large as possible, and you're going to have a more democratic country. You're going to have a less authoritarian government. But the smaller the coalition gets, because that's what dictators want, the more practical it becomes for them, because then they can maintain political survival. They throw out a ton of examples, and when I say the book is dense, that's what I'm talking about. There are example after example after example after example, etc., of them trying to prove their point. It gets kind of hard to follow after a while, but the primary point is there. Now, for my grievances with the book, most of it is, like, now, it is factual. They do include charts where they actually say, go to this website, you own this book, if you're listening to it, go to this website, therefore you can look at our charts as we're describing them, that way it can help give a visual aid. Which, I respect that. And no, I didn't go to Wikipedia, and I could do it now, but I'm not going to, because I just don't trust it. But my main grievance is when it tries to be overly presumptuous. Because, like, it goes really heavy into foreign aid, how if you want to try to decrease the incentive for dictators to continue doing what they're doing, cut off foreign aid rather than giving foreign aid. I don't necessarily know how I feel about that, because I haven't seen that in action, plus I don't necessarily want to see people suffer over it, but then again, the point that they're making is that the people are suffering anyway, so yeah, I get it. Shit in a pile of crap, you're stuck in the middle. So, whatever, I guess. The other thing it emphasizes is, like, having tangible results, or seeing tangible results of them trying to take the actions that it is you're trying to get them to do before actually giving them the funds. That I can get behind. Another reason that you can tell is before the death of Osama bin Laden is because it talks about Pakistan harboring Osama bin Laden, other Al-Qaeda members, other Taliban members, without actually talking about us going into Pakistan and eliminating the threat. It even talks about al-Baghdadi, though he died, I want to say 2019? Because the pandemic hadn't happened yet. But I think it was 2019 when he was the head of ISIS and he was taken out. But ISIS hadn't been, like, officially established yet, so the book wasn't exactly going to talk about that. But it does bring up al-Baghdadi. It does get a bit presumptuous on some things. And then the other thing I really didn't like is in the book, it talks about World War I. Basically, they try to implement the concepts that they had to, like, different parts of history, different things that had happened. And the one thing that bothered me more than anything else was them trying to implement it with World War I, when I more or less see it as them being very presumptuous that that's what happened, when in reality, World War I was for different reasons. It wasn't because of small coalitions trying to take advantage of resources or different things that were happening at the time. That was different causes, and I'm not going to get into that because that's not what this video is about. So yeah, like that was like my main takeaways from the book. I mean, I know at the end of Audible, yes, I'll listen to it on Audible. It says like, please rate our book 1 to 5 stars. It's not that kind of book. You can do it if you want to, but why? I mean, it's the kind of book you try to learn from, not the kind of book you try to rate. I think that should be reserved for like fiction books, where it's like, oh, the author did some really good nuance to try to emphasize this character's plot line, their character growth, da 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 da. This book really isn't that kind of book. This is more like trying to learn kind of book. And I did learn. Like, CDPJ, CGP Grey did do a really good job of describing the episode or describing the book in a matter of, I think it was like 9 or 10 minutes, because it really doesn't take that much. They were more just trying to use examples to prove their point. It felt more like I was listening to a bachelor's thesis than I did like a book trying to complete like a complex concept. So, yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts. I'm probably being way too basic about it, but I don't care. So, yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. So, cheers.